Hi, this is Brandon at Boulder Valley Instrument Repair, and today we're going to be talking about how to give your trumpet a bath. The things we're going to be talking about will also apply towards baritones, euphoniums, trombones, that sort of thing, but I've been getting a lot of questions about how to give your trumpet a bath at home. First thing is I have run some water in this tub here, just lukewarm water and Dawn dish soap. You don't want to use any harsh chemicals or anything like that. You also want to be careful about not getting the water too hot. If it gets much over about 100 degrees, it can damage the lacquer of your instrument. So we just want lukewarm water and Dawn dish soap and no other harsh chemicals. Make sure the soap doesn't have any abrasives in it, so you don't want lava soap with pumice or anything like that. First thing we're going to do is pull out the slides of the instrument. We have the main tuning slide here, and I'm just going to put these straight into the soapy water. Check the water key corks. As long as they're in good condition, they're not crumbling or falling out or anything like that, just leave them in there. They should be fine. Often the third valve slide will have a stop screw of some sort that locks that in there. So you'll want to remove that screw, which will allow the third valve slide to pull out. You may want to remove the finger ring, which you don't have to, but you can. So there's a screw that holds that in and that slides out. Once again, check the water key corks and make sure they're in decent condition and still sealing. If they are, that slide goes in the tub. Same thing with the first valve slide right here and the main tuning slide. Now, if any of these slides are stuck and you have a hard time getting them out, if they're stuck hard enough that you can't pull them by hand, it probably needs to come into the repair shop because sometimes these slides can be stuck hard enough that they'll actually pull some of these braces loose rather than the slide coming out. Also, if you do get it out and you start to see a lot of discoloration, like this slide's not horrible, but it is starting to get a little bit darker color on the outside. And if you look on the inside, there's some kind of green stuff in there. This slide is approaching the point where it needs to be either chemically cleaned or ultrasonically cleaned by a professional. But this instrument seems to be in pretty good condition, so we're going to continue with it. The valves are incredibly fragile, so I often will put a towel down in the bottom of the sink. If you've got a big bathtub, you might want to do these separately in the sink so that they don't get dropped and damaged. What you're going to do is unscrew the top valve cap and pull each valve out. Make sure it's on a place where it won't roll off and fall on the floor. And we're just going to set these out for now. Now the only thing left on the body of the instrument is the bottom valve caps, so go ahead and screw these off. If these are stuck so hard that you can't unscrew them by hand, once again, head on into your local repair shop. They can get these loose for you. And if they're stuck that hard, there's a good chance it needs to be chemically cleaned anyway. So we've got these caps off. We're going to put those in our soap and water solution. And then everything is now off of this trumpet. So we're going to put that in there. There are some differences in different makes and models. For instance, some of the Bach Stradivarius trumpets, the third valve slide has a slide built into the slide. You have to pull both of those apart to get them out. You'll know that because there'll be no water key on that third valve slide. And like I said, there are some other variations. Instead of a screw that locks that third slide in, sometimes there will be a little plastic stop that holds that slide in. You'll have to remove that. Now let's talk about the valves. These pistons need to be disassembled a little bit. I recommend that you unscrew the button off of the top of this valve, remove the top valve cap and this piece of felt. Now, it's possible to put the whole valve in just like this, but this felt over time will soak up the water and will need to be replaced much quicker if you don't remove it each time you give it a bath. So I like to pull all those apart. Now, for youngsters, you know, 5th, 6th, maybe even 7th grade, I recommend that you leave the valve stem and the valve guide and the spring all in place, because these are things that you can get mixed up if you don't put them back in the right way that you took them out. So it is totally fine to put a valve in just like this with all that stuff still in there. But for today's demonstration, we are going to actually fully disassemble a valve. So this one, once again, we're going to take the button off, cap off, the felt off, and at this point, you can take the valve stem apart, and if these are stuck hard enough that you can't get them off by hand, take it into your repair shop. Do not use pliers on any part of this instrument for any reason. If it's stuck hard enough that you need pliers, you need to bring it in and have a professional do it. This particular trumpet, on top of the spring, there's a little plastic guide for the spring that goes in there. Not all trumpets will have that. They'll often just be a spring. So once the stem is out and the spring is out, then you can slide the valve guide up. I like to slide it to the top, rotate it 90 degrees, and it will often slip right on through that gap there. So once again, just showing you how this came out. And pay attention to where the number is, because on this one, the number 2, this particular brand of trumpet, it comes out easier if you turn it upside down and slide the valve guide up, twist it 90 degrees, and pull it out through that slot. Some other brands of trumpets, it may be easier to pull it out with the number facing back up. Just pay very close attention when you take it apart, because you have to get it back in exactly the same way that it came out. There's also, on most valve guides, one side is flat and the other side has a cup for the spring to go in, like this. That cup side, when you put it back together, always has to be facing back up so that the spring goes in it. So there's valve number 2 and valve number 3. Take the button off, the top cap, the felt, the stem, the spring, and this valve guide. Okay. Now, everything is now in the soapy water. We're going to let that kind of soak. You can let it soak for 30 minutes or an hour or however long. It kind of depends on how dirty it is. We're going to skip ahead at this point, and so let's pretend like this has been soaking. We're now going to use a snake. The snake has brushes on each end of it. You don't ever want to use a snake like this with the valves still in the instrument. Only use the snake after everything has been disassembled, because sometimes these can get stuck down in the valve section. So, first, the main body of the instrument. So we're just going to put this snake through every part of tubing that we can get to. There's the lead pipe, first valve slide, second valve slides, third valve slide, and where the lead pipe comes back into the valve cluster. And then we're going to put this down the bell, and it will go all the way around the bell, and if it pokes into the valve casing, that's where you stop. You don't necessarily want to push it all the way through. So now we're going to pull that back out. You can put that back in the soapy water and let it soak while we do the other slides. Here's the third valve slide. And main tuning slide. And you can often press these snakes all the way around. If at any point the snake gets stuck, definitely bring it in to a repair tech, because you can cause damage trying to pull out a stuck snake. If you get through your cleaning process and notice that one of the brushes is missing from the end of your snakes, that means it's probably stuck somewhere in the instrument, and it can do some pretty major damage. So if you are missing any of these after you're done brushing out your trumpet, bring it into your repair tech and tell them what happened. They can try and find out what happened for you. If you get a cleaning kit, they will often come with a mouthpiece brush. This mouthpiece brush obviously goes inside the mouthpiece, but also is a good way to brush out the ports in your pistons. And so if you see any dirt or gunk or anything in there, you can use this soft bristled mouthpiece brush and try and get it out. If you see material in there that you can't get out with one of these brushes, once again, that needs to be chemically or ultrasonically removed by a professional. So we're just going to brush out these ports like that. Typically, you don't have to worry about the spring barrel. Oftentimes, dirt doesn't usually collect up in there. And especially, like I said, if you're a younger player, if this is your first or second year playing, feel free to leave all that assembled and just don't worry about the spring. Okay, one last brush that might come with your cleaning kit would be a valve casing brush. It'll be a much larger diameter than your mouthpiece brush. It may look something like one of these, and that is simply to clean the valve casings after you have removed the valves. So you can brush these out like that, get out anything that may be left in there, and now we're going to drain the water, being very careful that none of the parts go down the drain, and then we're going to do the rinse process. So we'll be back in just a minute after we've drained the water. Hi, we're back. So we have let our trumpet soak in the soapy water for a bit, and now we've drained the water out. Basically, we're just going to now rinse all the parts with clean water. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me speaking over the water, so I'll try not to say anything too important. Basically, every single part just needs to be rinsed clean of soap or dirt or any debris. So we've got the bottom valve caps. These can get particularly nasty. If you see a bunch of dirt and gunk in the bottom of them, sometimes I'll take Q-tips and just get the extra dirt out. So we've rinsed those clean, and we're just going to set them on the towel. Now on to the tuning slides. You just want to rinse all of that soapy water and dirt and gunk and anything that we can get out of there, rinse that out of there. Make sure that your water key is clear, so water should be coming out there if you open it. Same thing with all of the tuning slides. There's a third valve slide. Here's the second valve slide. Oh, I'm sorry, first valve slide. This is the second valve slide. And now the valves. If you remember, this first valve, we left it all assembled. So the spring, the valve guides, and the stem are all still there. But we disassembled the second and third. So we're just going to rinse these with clean water as best we can. These valves are hollow. If you look on the ends, there's holes in these valves. So you want to try and rinse all that soapy water out the best that you can. Set those on the towel to dry. And now the trumpet. The instrument should be essentially clean at this point. We're just washing all that soapy water out and any dirt or debris that might be left. So we started down the bell, and now we're putting water down each of the tuning slide tubes and the lead pipe. Just any place where you can put water in it, put water in it. Try and wash all that stuff out. And in the valve casings. It is not necessary to get these instruments perfectly dry. As you can imagine, while you're playing the instrument, water does condensate inside the tubes, which is why we have the water keys. You're constantly dumping the water out of these instruments. So they don't have to be perfectly dry. I often will just set these parts on a towel and let them air dry for 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. When you're ready to put it back together, just kind of shake the water out of the parts as best you can. I'm actually going to dry these a little by hand before I start putting it back together again. So we'll be back in just a moment. So I have dried these parts off with a towel, and they're mostly dry now, so we're ready to start reassembling. I'm going to start with the valves. As you can remember, this first valve, we had left the valve guide and the spring and the stem on. So now all we need to do is put this piece of felt back on the top. This is a good time to inspect the felt, make sure that it's not squished flat or there's chunks missing or anything like that. Then the top valve cap slides on and the button screws into the top. Now, there are a few different styles of valve configurations. If your instrument is very, very old, or some of the other brands like Getson, for example, the valve stem doesn't unscrew. You actually can move the spring out the side of the spring barrel. But the majority of the trumpets that you're going to see out there are going to be very similar to this. So we've reassembled that. Let's go back to the second valve now. Notice it has a number 2 on it, so we know that that's the second valve. And we remember how we took it apart. So this goes in like this. Feed it through the slot. Sometimes they're a little tough. Once it goes through, we're going to turn it to 90 degrees so that the cup is facing back towards the spring. And then they'll slide towards the bottom. The spring goes in. Not everybody will have these little plastic cups on their springs. This is mainly for student level Bach trumpets that are fairly new. Then the valve stem screws into the top. Valve felt, top valve cap, and the valve button. And one more time on the third valve. You can see the number 3 right there. We're going to feed the valve guide through the slot. Once again, this might be the most difficult part of this whole process, is getting this valve guide to go through the slots. Turn it 90 degrees so that the cup is facing up towards the spring. Spring goes in, valve stem, that screws in, valve felt, top cap, and the button. These felts are very important because as the valve moves up and down, the thickness of that felt determines where the valve stops and these holes line up. So if this felt is missing or damaged, or over time they can get pounded flat, they may need to be replaced, and a repair tech can measure actually for you and determine whether you need new valve felts. Inside the cap, there's often either a piece of felt, or in this case it's a rubber piece, and that limits the travel in the downward motion. So when the valve goes down, that's what lines up the ports with the different tubes in the instrument. So inspect this piece of felt or rubber. Occasionally there will be felt inside the valve button as well. So just look all those different places and make sure that your felt is in good shape. Before I put these pistons back in, I like to put the bottom valve caps on. Be very careful that you don't get these cross-threaded. If they do not turn easily when you screw them back on, you've probably got it cross-threaded. So back it off and try it again. Sometimes it helps to turn it in the wrong direction first, counterclockwise, and then start turning it clockwise. It helps it line the threads up. If you can't get it back on correctly, definitely bring it into your repair tech. That's usually a simple fix. Now we're going to put the valves, the pistons back in the instrument, and as we do so, we're going to use some valve oil. Basically, any type of valve oil will work. This is Alcas. It's been around for a long time. It's a petroleum-based valve oil. They do also make synthetic oils. One thing that I have learned is that often petroleum and synthetic do not like to mix. So if you're going to switch from one to the other, you want to clean your instrument very well in between before you switch your valve oil. So we're just going to put a few drops here on the piston. And it should drop in very easily. Once it goes in, we're going to spin the button until the valve guide clicks into place. Now it won't turn anymore. And at this point, you'll screw the top cap back on. I often find it easier to start this cap if you push the valve down and turn it backwards until it clicks past the threads, and then it will start without cross-threading most of the time. And it's working great. We're going to repeat that process with the other two valves. So we've got the number 2 right there. Start it in there. Add some valve oil. Drops into place. Turn it till it clicks. Tighten the top cap. And one more time for the third valve. A little bit of oil. It's important that you put the oil on this gray part of the valve. You will often see people oiling their valves in different ways. For example, I see young students all the time who put valve oil in these holes in the bottom of their bottom caps. If you remember, the valves are hollow. So if you do that, the oil is just going to go inside the valve, and then when you turn it up and start playing it, it's just going to leak back out through the holes, and it doesn't actually get where it needs to go. So the best way to oil these valves is to actually unscrew the top cap, pull it up, and put oil on the gray part of the valve. So we've got the valves in. Now, for the tuning slides, we're going to get a little bit of tuning slide grease. It doesn't take very much. I'm going to start with this third valve and just a tiny little bit of grease. Same thing on the inner slide tube of this slide. A little bit of grease. Oftentimes it's easier to put this finger ring back together before you install it into the trumpet. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Once it's in there, you can loosen this screw and adjust the ring to whatever position is comfortable for you. And if you have any resistance when you push that slide on, there could be a dent or there could be some kind of dirt or something in the way. So don't force that on there. You can cause some damage. It should slide on there pretty easily. If it doesn't, see your local repair tech. And now we don't want to forget the third valve stopper screw. So this screws back in here. As I mentioned before, there are some different places where this screw might be located, or even a big plastic thing that keeps it from falling out. Or some older trumpets may not have a third valve slide stop at all. But this just keeps the slide from falling completely out of the instrument when it's turned this way. So now we're also going to lubricate the first valve slide. A little bit of slide grease there. There are many different types of tuning slide grease. Probably the most common and popular one would be made by Schilke, but there's lots of different ones out there. So ask at your local music store what they recommend for their tuning slide grease. So that slides back on. Sometimes the air pressure can build up inside and can actually push the slide back out, which is why it's a good idea to hold down the valve as you press that slide back in. Same thing when you're removing the valve slides. It's a good idea to press that valve down. The second valve slides are so short that they can be difficult to get in and out. So if your second valve slide is hard to remove or hard to put back in, see a professional repair tech, and they should be able to loosen it up for you. It could also mean that your instrument is ready for professional cleaning. I usually recommend that people give their instruments a bath in the bathtub like this about once a month, especially if they're playing on a regular basis. And then on top of that, approximately once a year, it will need to be cleaned by a professional, whether that's a chemical cleaning process or ultrasonic cleaning. Both are very good methods to clean your brass instruments. So, if you have trouble getting the slides back in, it often means that one slide tube is ahead of the other one. So just wiggle it back and forth until it goes in. If there are any dents or damage or misalignments to these slides, it can cause them to be hard to get in and out. And once again, at that point, you'll need to see your professional band repair tech. So, this trumpet is now cleaned, it's been lubricated, and it's ready to be played again. So, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My website is bouldervalleyinstrumentrepair.com. All my information is there. And come on in and see us at HB Woodsongs, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you so much.